Hi everyone, and welcome to this full moon eclipse video recording. I'm making this ceremony for you on the morning of the full moon. It is Saturday the 28th of October. The moon is going to be full in Taurus tonight. It will be about 8:23 or exactly 8:23 GMT in the UK. It's going to be a little before 2 a.m. here in India. So this morning felt like the perfect time to record this. Obviously, I love alastminute.com, but I think it's really interesting to see how the energy unfolds in the run up to a full moon or an eclipse, particularly. And then we often really notice as we reach the peak, something really has shifted and we start to see what it's all really going to be about. So I feel that this week has been quite magnetic, is the word that's coming in. It's been very mercurial. Personally, for me, it's been extra mercurial because my Mercury is at 4 degrees Scorpio. So I've had a Mercury return through the centre of this week. But Mercury's been really active moving into Scorpio. And Mercury is all about communication, all about the voice, how we tell our story, how we get our truth out there, how we find our authentic voice. And also in the same kind of journey, in the same part of the charts, the part of the skies is Mars. So Mercury and Mars are very tight together in Scorpio. In fact, they are in a conjunction today and they're conjunct the sun today. So that's going to be happening opposite the full moon tonight. So there's kind of a lot of big energy, not just with the full moon, which we know is always big, and not just an eclipse, which we know is always massive and quantum, but we've also got some other really big stuff happening in the skies. So this ceremony is really all about giving you a little bit of background to the astrology, giving you a wider kind of narrative around this full moon eclipse and what's really going on, the timelines you can look at in your own life, your own chart. We're going to look at some journaling prompts. We're going to talk about my favorite things, tarot cards, and I'm going to do a little reading for you to help you move through this really big energy. But let's start at the beginning. Where else? What is a full moon eclipse? Well, a full moon, you don't need me to tell you, is the one where you can see the moon. We had a new moon eclipse 2 weeks ago on the 14th of October. That was a new moon in Libra. The new moon is when we can't see the moon in the sky. It's when the moon and the sun are aligned. And actually the sun is blocking out the moon, and the shadow of the sun is blocking out the moon, rather. So we are in the opposite situation now. In terms of the lunar cycle, we normally say that a new moon is about beginnings, it's the gateway opening, it's manifesting, it's getting things off the blocks, getting things started. A full moon is the completion. This is usually an end point. It's the end of a journey. It's the gate closing. It's the culmination of the story. It's the epilogue. And usually it's the part of the story that's here to really give us a final kind of like twist or a punchline, just something we need to know in order to really move on. I've got my little swooshy bits of cloth here getting in the way. I'm going to do something about that or it's going to drive me crazy all the way through this recording. So the full moon is already quite a biggie, and this full moon is Taurus. So you probably already know that astrology works in pairs. Everything has an opposite and an equal. And what we have going on today is the full moon in Taurus, which is opposite the sun in Scorpio. So these two signs deal very specifically with the idea of resource, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we move through the journey today. But what makes it an eclipse? So the eclipse is energetically a really super quantum portal. And it's where actually the degree points of, mathematically and physics-wise, it's where the degree points of the sun and the moon mean that there is a bit of a shadow from one to the other. So in this case, it's a partial lunar eclipse tonight, where part of the moon in certain parts of the world will be obscured by the sun's shadow. I know I'm not going to see it here in India. I'm actually not entirely sure where you're going to see it. I haven't bothered to look it up. You can Google that. I'm pretty sure you won't be seeing that in the UK, because if you were, it'd be all over the news and the internet this morning. However, what eclipses are all about is really what goes on the inside, not what goes on the outside. They are all about really big shadow work, about things moving really fast, about whatever's been happening in your life, turning up the speed and it pushing through an absolute rate of knots. So eclipses always happen in pairs. We always have a new moon followed by a full moon. It can be the other way around. What we have got this week, is that we've just had a new moon eclipse in Libra, and now we're going to have the full moon eclipse in Taurus. And this is kind of an oddity because they're not the natural pair. The pair is Scorpio and Taurus, not Libra and Taurus. But one of the things that makes this moon extra big is that it's actually the end of a kind of an eclipse pairing. So we have eclipses that are attached to the nodes of the moon, and these change about every 18 to 20 months. So we have eclipses over the course of an 18 to 20 month period in the same two signs. And then there's a little overlap before we move on to the next two. So this is where we complete the overlap effectively. We have had 18 months of Scorpio and Taurus eclipses, and then we just had one, we had the Libra and Aries kind of getting started, and now we're just wrapping up Taurus and Scorpio, and then the next two are going to be fully the Libra Aries axis. So it is a little bit of a journey. We're kind of very much we often refer to the space between eclipses as an eclipse tunnel, but we really are in a big tunnel for this one. We're between two eclipses and also between two wider axes. So eclipses in general, and I think particularly when we have these gateways where we're kind of reaching the end of a cycle, the end of an axis, really help us to zoom out and see that bigger cycle, which is what the cycles of the moon, what the phases of the moon, what all this astrological work is really all about, for me anyway. You know, astrology gives us a lens to see the world through different timelines, through different perspectives, different experiences. You know, when the sun is in Gemini, we're invited to look particularly at the spotlight being on how we are kind of interacting, our social selves, our butterfly, how we move around and how we can context switch and interact with different types of people. When the sun is in Scorpio, we are in a season which is all about the deep dark work and the sacral chakra and the roots of the body, the stuff that we hide, the things that, the secrets and the lies, basically the stuff we keep hidden from ourselves even because we're not ready to process it. So we have these big kind of overall overarching stories. But what the moon does is allow us to kind of journey through them every month. And particularly if you're a woman, if you have a cycle, or even if you had a cycle, if you don't have it anymore, you know what this feels like as you move through a journey from opening a gateway to completing a gateway in your menstrual cycle. And the moon really offers us this kind of illumination, this lens, this filter in a wider scale. And then what happens with eclipses is that we can see it in an even bigger scale. So when we have a full moon, the first window we look at is when was the new moon in that sign. The new moon in Taurus was back in May this year. So the first window you can look at is from May up to now. And actually I'm going to check the exact date for you because I have not checked that and I should have done. So the new moon in Taurus was all about opening a new journey in terms of the Taurian themes, which is grounding, stability, abundance, the having of the things, feeling secure in our bodies. Taurus is all about that kind of structure and having, you know, feeling like you've got a hold of something and you know what's going on and you're safe. So that new moon was May the 19th for the train spotters among you. So that gateway opened on May the 19th and now it's closing. So the first invitation is what has been happening for you in Taurian themes. So abundance, money, stuff, physicality, the having of the things, and resource is a really important word here. What's been happening in terms of your resources over the last 6 months? What started at the end of May that is now coming to a close? And I know for me personally, I find these 6 month windows really helpful because 6 months seems like a lot. It can also just be a blink of an eye, and it really has felt that way to me in this last 6 months. So have a little look. If you journal, it's really nice to go back to your journals. If you don't, you can look at your phone, look at your calendar, look at what you were doing, what events were you at, what was going on in your work life, you know, what were the family up to. Just try and project yourself back to what was going on in that third week of May, roughly, and just have a look at the big themes in your life, particularly around that Taurian story, and see where it's got to now, what's coming to a natural end. And there might be, I know this is true for me, it always is, there might be something that you're slightly struggling to let go of, that you're a bit like, oh, it's just, this feels like it's done, but I'm just sort of not quite ready yet. The full moon is your message to go, you know what, it's time to put it down. So it's really helpful to know what you're putting down. So have a look back into your journals, reflect into your life, sit in meditation if it's in your practice. It really is helpful to reflect back. It's also really helpful to look, if you know a bit about your chart, and if you don't, of course I can help you, to have a look at which part of your chart contains Taurus. So this will give you further illumination and a further clue to help you understand exactly what's going on in a certain part of your life. So for me, for example, Taurus is my 4th house, it's cusp 4th and 5th. So the themes are going to be about abundance, stuff, the having of the things, value and self-worth, but very specifically for me in the themes around the 4th house, which is the home, family, kind of ancestry, structures, the roots and foundations of your life, and the 5th house, creativity and self-expression. So I can see some really clear portals opening and closing here for me because I've made a big geographical move in this window of time. So the things that were important to me in terms of the values and the resources I was holding dear back in May have now completely changed, and I'm moving through a very different part of life and a very different understanding of what resource looks like. So that is a little clue as to how to look at this eclipse in terms of the Taurian themes and in your own chart. So if you don't have your chart, you can go to my website. I'm going to put a link under this video and you can download it for free. If you need to understand a bit more about how to read your chart, there is an eclipse cheat sheet, which I will attach also under this video. You can download that. That's going to help you understand whereabouts in your chart to look for Taurus and for this full moon, and how to read the top themes that I'm going to talk about in a minute relative to yourself. And of course, if you want to go deeper, you can always contact me. We can go through it one-to-one, and there is a course coming up that's going to teach you how to do all of this for yourself. So you don't even need me, you just need yourself. You can be your own astrologer. Everybody can be. So I feel like I'm talking really quick today. Sorry if I'm firing through. Maybe I'll slow this down a little bit in the edit. So the Taurus story is from May the 19th up to today, October the 28th. That is this year's Taurian lunar cycle, new moon to full moon, a beginning and an end, a journey in between. What's it been looking like for you? But eclipses give us an even bigger and more expansive perspective. And what we're coming to today is the end of the Scorpio-Taurus eclipse cycle. This is the last eclipse in this story. There's always 4. So we have a new and a full moon, each in 2 signs. And the Taurus-Scorpio story began back in November 2021 with the new moon in Scorpio. So you can zoom back even further, and I had to do this myself this morning. I scrolled back on my iCal to have a look at what I was doing around there, and I had a reasonable idea because it was the week of my birthday, and I remember very particularly what I was doing over that new moon. It's really interesting to go back to that time, to have a look at what was happening in your life. Again, if you journal, it's really useful to have a reflection. And if you don't, and we're going to do this in a minute anyway, you can sit in meditation and just see if you can project yourself back into the energies that you were carrying at the beginning of this cycle. So a new moon in Scorpio is a potent thing. Scorpio, as we know, is always a potent energy. It holds a lot of shadow, a lot of darkness, but a huge amount of regeneration and phoenix from the flames, resurrection energy. So a new moon in Scorpio is nearly always about starting a new journey in terms of going down into that sacral root where we hold a lot of emotions, all of our water energy. Scorpio is a fixed water sign. And it's all about the idea that we are going into that space to excavate, to really have a rake through and to move through the things that are not going to be for us, that we need to process, that we need to get out of our body, out of our somatic field, surface and dissolve, so that we can move on with our purpose, our dharma, and staying on the path we're here to be part of in this life. So a new moon in Scorpio would have really opened that gateway, and that I think was about November 15th, 5th. I'm just checking for you. I wish I had done this before. I always forget, but I have at least got a laptop here that I can review. Let's have a little look. So the new moon in Scorpio was November the 5th, 2021. And it was at 12 degrees of Scorpio. Today's full moon is at 5 degrees of Taurus. So it's really worth having a look at your own chart. If you know how to run your chart over different timelines, go back to November 2021. What was happening? What was going on? You can see this in clues on your photos on your phone. I love to do this, to go back over full and new moon periods and just have a look at the dates and be like, oh, what was I doing? Who was I with? Where was I going? What was life looking like? There's many ways you can do this personal projection. But where we're arriving at today is the end game, the end point. And actually we've been on the journey into this end point over the last 2 to 4 weeks as we've moved through this eclipse portal that we've been in. So what we're arriving at today is actually the end of a really big cycle of nearly 2 years that began on November the 5th, 2021. So take a look back, have a look at what was big for you then, what was starting then, and maybe it was a feeling. And I would say, because we're in a watery, scorpionic, emotional landscape, it almost certainly was a feeling. So look at how your emotions were. Like, what were you thinking about in your life? Pause for the plane. What were you considering maybe starting? Was it a new relationship? Were you beginning to feel differently about your work or your path? Was it where you were in the first inklings of maybe I want to have a baby in the next year, or maybe it's time to relocate, or maybe I feel like I really want to start looking at ditching my career and making my side hustle my passion, my job? So have a little journey through, and you'll probably find that something was starting around then that now feels like it's arriving at its natural ending. And if you can't see the natural ending, that is what this journey and today's video and ceremony is all for. It's to help you reach in and see if you can understand what that journey is so that you can apply the relevant closure as we move through this full moon. So that is the two big kind of time frames that you can work with when it comes to this particular full moon in Taurus. And don't forget, the more you can look at your own chart individually, the more you can really refine and fine tune this for yourself. You can really make total clear visibility on what is actually going on for you in your chart, rather than all of this like broad strokes astrology that I'm talking about and that you see everywhere on the internet this weekend. It's really valuable, of course. There are big themes that affect us all. We're going to talk about those now. But also you can really, really understand this personally when you know what's going on in your own chart. What I really love about doing this today is it's like 8 a.m. and I'm already really sweaty. So completely opposite full moon energy to where I would normally be for a full moon in Taurus.